I'm Frank Devitt. I'm from Maynooth University. I'm going to talk about design thinking, and I guess most of you have heard of it already. I know it's been mentioned in some presentations earlier today. But I'm not going to give a full overview on design thinking. I want to just focus on the theme for today, the main stage, which is from ideas to impact. And I want to indicate a few ways in which design thinking brings ideas to impact. And the first thing to say is that I've been teaching and training and coaching in design thinking for the last 7 years. And I've run many design thinking sessions with students and industry people. Most recently, in fact, currently we're running a design thinking masterclass under the auspices of the IRDG. This is the third of these. We had one last spring, one last autumn, and now we're going to one this spring. And during those design thinking sessions, we always have an hour or two of ideation. One thing you can be sure of, there's no shortage of ideas. We get 100 ideas easily in an hour, no problem. Just going through a few methods of getting ideas out that are sort of interesting in some way. It's not just me saying it, many industry people and commentators and academics say it also. Professor Rita Gunther-McGrath is Professor of Strategy and Innovation at the Columbia Business School, a very well-known and reputable author, and she says idea generation is seldom the problem. She says to get breakthrough concepts, you really need some kind of framework. So blue skies thinking, blue skies ideas are perhaps very relevant for scientific research, and I think it's a very useful mode of scientific research. But when it comes to business innovation, you need a shorter timescale, and you need, in order to have some reasonable impact in a reasonable timescale, you need to have some sort of framework, according to Rita Gunther-McGrath. So what does a framework constitute? It needs two things to start with: inspiration, and then concept, selection, and validation. So let's just start with the idea of ideas. Then we corral them, so to speak, into a framework, corralled by inspiration on the one hand, and then validation on the other hand. That begins to make it tangible and make it accessible and give some focus that will result in impact. If we go further to the left of that, I might ask, where does inspiration come from? Well, in order to have impact in a reasonable timescale, you need to get inspiration from the people who are going to use the innovation. Or more broadly, you might say you get inspiration particularly from the context of use, the users and other stakeholders associated with the context of use. And in order to do that, you need to audit what is known about that context. You need to dive down into your own knowledge, desk research, reports, all of that sort of thing. But you also need to dig deeper into the user research. And this is an ethnographic type of research that some of the previous speakers spoke about. Out of all that, then, you get a really deep understanding. And with that understanding, you're able to reframe your problem into a new focus. And that reframing is a pivotal part of the design thinking exercise. In fact, it's a pivotal part of radical innovation, to get a deeper understanding and take a different perspective on what you're attempting to achieve. So there are numerous examples of that. Cirque du Soleil is one example, where they looked at the circus, which was about animals, about kids enjoying themselves with animals, and they said, well, let's take a different view on that. What if we got rid of the animals, which are expensive anyway, and a lot of people don't like animals being used in circuses? And what if we made it into a nice night out for a couple, a sort of a high-class night out, which it has become very successful for that. There are many other examples, and I'll show one or two of them later. So we need this deep research and deep understanding in order to frame the problem definition properly. Then we can go into the ideation. Let me just see if I'll point with this. Yeah. Then we can go into the ideation. And of course, a very important part of ideation then is to select the interesting ideas, develop them into concepts, or coalesce them into concepts perhaps, and then get validation on those concepts. And you have to go back to the users again to get the validation. This is all before development happens. So that, in a nutshell, is what is a design thinking framework. I'm going to explain it a little bit more now. This is we like to think of it in terms of 3 dimensions, 2 contexts, and a process. There's numerous ways of describing the process. The two contexts are current reality and future reality. And if you think about it that way, you're trying to organise a transition from a current reality into a future reality, and you need the crucial pivot. The crucial pivot is the insight of the reframed insight into the reframed problem statement. The 3 dimensions within each of these are people, technology, and business. We were sort of referring to that in the end of the last panel discussion. So technology gets a lot of emphasis in innovation. I would say a little bit too much, just by emphasis. Of course, it's very important, but it's people ultimately that are going to use the technology, and therefore design thinking. If you want to think about design thinking, it's about restoring the balance a little bit in favour of people, and achieving a nice balance between desirability, feasibility, and viability around those three dimensions. And so you're looking for people delighters, a technology roadmap or a technology implementation roadmap, and a business model, obviously, that will satisfy all the criteria. And you're looking for viability, desirability, and feasibility. Let's talk about a process. It just so happens, it's not an accident, but we forced it into this, that it becomes a nice little acronym. If you audit what's known, if you research to find out more, if you reframe to change the perspective, if you ideate to come up with new ideas and concepts focused on that reframed perspective. That's really important. So now you do your ideation. Now you've got your ideas, but focused on a problem statement which has come deeply from deep research. And then you validate, and then you exploit, and that's our arrive process. But there are many other processes. There's the Darden process, which is the 4 steps that I think you heard earlier today. There's the well-known D-School process of understand, observe, point of view, ideate, validate, prototype, test. So many processes, they're all basically going through the same pivot point in the middle, research before it, and ideate and validate after it. That's it. Very valuable. And so the real value of design thinking, I think, is that it restores a balance between the three dimensions, and that it gives upstream research, or it emphasises upstream research before you come to the reframing and the ideation. Ideas alone are just a small part of it, and they'll be a bit wild, as Rita Coulter-McGrath said, if you don't give them a focus. Just to emphasise that a little bit, here's a bit of stuff, that if you put more work and more understanding into the front stage, you get better insight at the pivot stage, and you get a better future reality, more radical, more transformative future reality. So why should you be interested in design thinking? Well, for one thing, everybody's talking about it. So let me show you a few things. The Harvard Business Review is one of the 2 most influential business publications in the world, I think it could be argued. And last September, just a few months ago, they devoted a full issue to the evolution of design thinking. In the academic world, the Journal of Management is one of the most influential journals in the world of academic business. And last February, they devoted a full issue to it. Many companies, almost any large company you can think of these days, has design thinking as part of its armoury in the innovation space. IBM there has its own. Go to IBM/design thinking. You get lots of really useful information that shows you how IBM is approaching design thinking. And they say they're using it to form intent by developing understanding and empathy for our users. And they have lots of interesting stuff. They on their site, this is just Rob from the site, they have 70 projects, they have 68 something or others I can't read, and there are 500 leaders that they've trained in design thinking. IBM is into this in a big way, and they're in the process. They're coming toward the end of a 3-year plan of hiring 1,500 designers to introduce design thinking around the world. Many of these, or at least a few hundred of these, are in 100 here in Dublin. So IBM company into it in a big way, but there are many others. I won't go through them all. Our own IBEC here at home, its annual CEO conference last April or May had a main theme of design. The IRDG conference in September before that had a main theme of design thinking. So everybody's talking about it. At the very least, people should know about it, know what they're talking about, and know what part of the attraction for these people is. So, 5 good reasons. It's not a comprehensive list, just five reasons to keep it reasonably short. Let me read them out. If you want to drive transformative, human-centered innovation, and that's not to say that you leave the technology behind you, but just to restore the balance is the way I would say it, with technology-centered innovation. To rapidly filter and develop ideas, and this is an important thing. It's not just about having ideas, it's about processing those ideas into concepts and validating the concepts. So you've got a really good quality concept then for development. That's a really important part of business innovation. In a nutshell, development is about doing the project right, you're developing it correctly, but design thinking is about doing the right project. And of course that's equally valuable, or even more valuable might be argued, to do the right project before you do the project right. I didn't mean to do that, excuse me here. Another interesting use for design thinking, or where it's very useful, is that many situations are very complex, and we all know of the phenomenon of paralysis by analysis. Design thinking, the mentality, the mindset is about doing something, measuring, and iterating. So you all know the idea of rapid prototypes. Well, rapid prototypes can be applied to business models, they can be applied to services, they can apply to anything. The idea of a low-fidelity rapid prototype, get out there, learn about the prototype, is the way to address a complex situation. You can't analyse a complex situation. You can't analyse world peace because it's just not amenable to analysis. But you can do something. You can learn bit by bit in the sector, in the section that you're particularly interested in. Another point about design thinking, number 4 there, is that it mitigates the causes and the effects of cognitive bias. So we all have biases, but when you go out there and start talking to people and try things out, then your biases begin to be broken down, or shown up for what they are. Maybe they're valid, or maybe they're not valid. But getting out there talking to people, which is a great, and trying out things, even in a low fidelity way, is a great emphasis that design thinking has. And so just doing that mitigates against the bad effects of cognitive bias. And finally, just a random 5 benefits, if you like, of design thinking. There's a lot of... design thinking is not about design, it's about bringing the principles and the skills and the methods of design to business innovation. And so, if you get into design thinking, you learn some generic innovation skills which are generically useful, but which have been practiced a lot by designers over the years. And these are skills of observation, of empathy, synthesis of insights, visualization, which is a great way of thinking and communicating, interpretive thinking, creativity, collaboration. So these are 5. I'm going to go through 1 or 2 of them now, not go through them all exhaustively because of the time. But let me go through one and show how design, as an example of design thinking driving transformative human-centered innovation. So, for example, some of you may have heard of this. MRI is one of the world's largest manufacturers of MRI machines, and of course they make MRI machines especially for kids as well. And anyone who has had an MRI, in particular upper body MRI, knows it's a frightening experience, particularly if you're claustrophobic. But for a kid, it's a particularly frightening experience. Not only is it restricted in space, but it's very noisy and goes through a series of weird noises. So apparently for children, it has been the case that they have 80% sedation rates, which is not very satisfactory. Also, multiple repeat procedures. So if the kid moves during the MRI, it invalidates the procedure, they have to go in again, be sedated and go in again. So it's a very poor, if you want to put it in business terms, a very poor utilisation of the machine when kids use it, because of the difficulties that kids have to experience the machine. If you want to address that from a technology point of view, it's not easy, because you would need to increase the hole size, you would need to decrease the noise and all that sort of stuff. So it is reputed, it's well reported, I should say, not just reputed, that about 5 or 6 years ago, I think it was, a senior designer in GE, Doug Deeth, observed by accident a kid really distraught at going into the machine and resolved to do something about it. And what he did about it was the following. He made the machine into a play, into a story, into a toy, and I think they also had, adjacent to the machine itself, they had a playroom where the parents could accustom the kid to the sort of environment that they were going to be in, but in the context of the story. In this case, it's a pirate story, so they call it their adventure series. And the noises were associated with the machine going into hyperdrive and all that sort of thing. That's really good, excellent human-centered innovation. Came from a deep understanding of what kids are really about, what their issue was, and how to resolve it for them. But not only that, on the side, by the way, it was great business effectiveness, because the sedation rates went down dramatically from 80% down to 10 or 15%. And also, of course, the utilisation in business terms of the machine increased because there were less repeat runs. So there's a great example of a design thinking applied to a real business problem, but taking the human-centered perspective. It's said that Doug Deeth had full satisfaction, fulfillment finally when he went to see these series being used, when he witnessed a kid asking the mother to come back tomorrow. Another example is the smoke alarm. Maybe you know where this is going, but smoke alarms are just ugly and annoying, and they have been for years, and they're just boring old things. And the only experience you have with them is when they go off and they drive you mad in the middle of the night, because they shout at you, they're alarming, and you don't know how to turn them off temporarily, except you've got a hammer nearby. And so they're basically devices that they give you a poor experience. So taking the customer experience point of view, Nest, that you may have heard of, adopted a different approach, and they made it beautiful for a start. They said safety shouldn't be annoying. Of course, being annoying, it's not safe, so it's a contradiction in terms of safety. It was annoying. They said be informed and not alarmed, and we made a smoke and CO2 alarm that you love because hating is dangerous. And some fantastic videos associated with this. So people love it. People pay a fortune for these. You pay 180 or 220 euro for this, in comparison to the tenner for the ordinary alarm. But first of all, people are willing to pay for the pleasure of having it. But secondly, it's commercially very valuable to have. Nest was founded in 2010 and they were sold in 2014 for $3.2 billion to Google. And they had only two products at that time, the Nest Protect Smoke Alarm and then also a Nest Thermostat. And that was from good understanding of the users and designing a system around a technology that facilitated the user. There's nothing miraculous or groundbreaking about the technology they use, but of course they use most recent technologies, IoT type technologies. But they proprietarily, they've nothing brilliant about, they've nothing fantastically proprietary, I should say, about their technology. But they use existing technology to make the experience better for the user. To put that into context, so I've said there's sort of three dimensions to innovation. There's the business, there's the technology, and there's the humanity or the personal part. Roberto Briganti produced this diagram, which is a nice diagram for showing the axes of an innovation. So you have technology at that axis and meaning, what does the product mean to the human? And it's the meaning that gives them their experience with the product. It's a nice diagram. Let me just show you how it might be used and applied to some things. The Wii. Most people will have heard of the Wii. And it was truly transformative and very successful for Nintendo. They, of course, were in a race, a technology race for a long time. Nintendo, with Microsoft, Xbox, and Sony PlayStation. So they were in that race. Every Christmas time, I suppose, they had a new gigabit something or other and a new gigabit something or other hertz at the same time. Increasing in the technology domain. But what did they do? They said, well, let's look at it again. Traditional games were fairly virtual and they were fairly solitary and lots of other dimensions. So they said, can we innovate from making it from the virtual to the physical and from solitary to the social? And that's what they did. And on that plot that I showed you a few minutes ago, you can plot here the way where the traditional dimension of competition was vertically along the technology dimension. They moved along a dimension of meaning. So now what does it mean to what does the we mean to people? Well, it can be social, it can be for all ages, and it can be physical. Those are attributes that you could not apply in general to the previous games, which were for very special types of people, gamers, who love to call themselves gamers. That is a great example of, again, human understanding leading to a dimension of competition that brought success for many years. And of course the others followed, which is what happens. Another example is Swatch. Well, we know that Swatch was, or Smith watches generally. There were watches that they were jewellery items, and then they became instruments. But of course then as they went electronic away from the clockwork, the Eastern manufacturers took over. The Swatch industry was in great danger. But what Swatch did is they advanced along the meaning dimension, and they made them into luxury items and fashion items, and thereby achieved great success. So there's great opportunity for innovating along the dimension of the personal, the personal experience, and that's what design thinking is particularly good for. Not to the exclusion of technology, but really in leading technology and using technology then when it's appropriate, when and as appropriate. So, just one more thing to say. How much time? Okay, yeah. Finish? Yeah, okay. I can see a time indicator. Okay, so 2 minutes then, and I'll finish, promise. it's also about validation. So it's not just about getting the inspiration, the ideation, which I've been talking about. Design thinking is also about validation. You know, everyone's heard of the 20% time of Google. Well, of course, before that there was the 15% time of 3M. Ericsson has its ANOVA system, or has had its ANOVA system, where they take ideas which come from numerous sources and converge those in a framework, as Rita Gunter McGrath said, in a confined framework, in a short timescale framework, into validated concepts which can then be considered for development. And so design thinking can do that. In the interest of time, I'm just going to carry on and say this is the Ericsson ANOVA system, which was about taking ideas, putting them through a design thinking type of framework in order to rapidly develop them into concepts that were at least semi-validated and then could be considered for real development. How does it work? Well, it starts with people, like I said. You make tangible, you take action. It's about experimenting, probing, and learning from the experiment. You seek new options, you learn through action, and you get it out of your head. So it's an action-oriented, it's a human-centered, it's about achieving empathy, and those are the key points, I would say, that apply to design thinking. And the reasons why it's so popular these days, it gives the other dimension of innovation, as well as it helps you to take action in the face of very complex market circumstances. Oh, there's lots of models, but I'm not going to talk about any of them there. You can just look them up. Finally, is it worth it? Well, here's a recent study that was brought out in spring of last year, where they looked back at, well, first of all, they made a definition of what would constitute a design thinking company. And with that definition, it's a very rigorous definition, they chose, these are all American companies, deliberately, it was only confined to America, they chose these companies. And then they look back 10 years, what was the stock performance of those American companies in comparison to the S&P 500. And there you go, you see there's a 119% improvement in performance, in stock performance, over 10 years for those companies that could be deemed to be design thinking oriented companies in comparison to normal companies. And that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.